Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. I hope you're having an absolutely amazing day. It is a beautiful day down in coastal North Carolina. It's 85 degrees and cloudy. There it is. And it's that time of year, you know, for us in the south on the coast, it's that time of year. And then going into the fall, it's going to be the next time of year. So what we're talking about is like really hurricane protection for your garden. And it's not just, you know, pick up your tools and put it away. Like, that's common sense. But even get into like nor'easters, severe weather, stuff like that. I mean, we work really hard in our gardens. And how many hours have you put into your garden, getting it to where you want it to be, growing it, taking care of it, having it look the way you do, and then a storm's going to come and potentially just take it away. And we don't really want that to happen. So we need to figure out how we want to make the garden stay where it is. And I mean, I know, like I said, like severe storms and stuff like that, and that's harder to do. You know, getting ready. I would say if you're in an area like gets a lot of severe weather, it's usually very seasonal, and I would look out for that season and be prepared on hand, especially if you know, like, hey, you could get hail or high winds or anything like that. But in particular for us, it's mostly hurricanes we're worried about. So you can apply this to just about everything. You may have to tweak it a little bit for your specific area and concern. But, you know, nor'easters and hurricanes they're not the same, but they can be very similar. So we do a lot to keep our garden here and present and growing during this time. And it's definitely an uphill battle. I'm not even going to lie. Like, every time we get any kind of tropical storm, category 1 through, I think this garden's been through a 4, all of that, you have to be concerned about it, and you don't know how it's going to end up. Not all hurricanes are the same, and not all parts of the hurricane are terrible. So that is part of it. But we generally like to get everything prepared and hunkered down as best as possible. So if I was going to have a hurricane in 2 days, what would I do to my garden today? Other than pick up the random hoe I've got laying around and, you know, putting pots away and stuff like that. But, you know, out here, the first thing I would do, and I see glaring, is I would definitely take down this sunshade. At bare minimum, I would just roll it up and then tie it off to the stakes. You know, when it comes to stuff like tomatoes, so we come over here to our tomato patch, and what I would do is, you would want to do the most you can to keep the plant standing. And so the first thing I do is I come through and I would remove all of the fruits if it was going to be a bad storm, especially this one because it's got a big old hole in it. So we would come through and remove all of the fruits. And that goes for just about every plant in the garden: eggplants, peppers, not so much melons for this particular purpose, but squashes, especially like in our Seminole pumpkins, we would definitely take those off for multiple reasons. One, it causes more wind resistance in the plant, and so the wind can catch it, and that would help push it down. And the other thing too is it can become a projectile, so we definitely want to take that into consideration. I mean, I don't want a window getting blown out because a tomato got in, or a hole in my greenhouse because of that. So we would clear out all of what we have and harvest, because you got to think, if you're going to be getting 100, 120 mile an hour winds, it's more than likely not going to stay. So, you know, we just go ahead and we bite the bullet. So we'll do that. And one reason why I use tomato cages, and I hate they were so expensive this year and couldn't continue to use them, but we do have some out here. So one thing I would do is I would come out to this tomato cage, for instance, and I would tie it off to here and just give it more balance, because the plant's not actually holding itself up. It's the tomato cage that's holding it up. So we would go ahead and just kind of anchor that down the best we can. And same for these trellises here. We would just double check and make sure that they're, you know, the zip ties that are holding them on, they're doing good. And if not, we would replace them. We would do stuff like that. The vines here, if the vines aren't holding on well, what we can do is we can take some twine And you know, you can't really, like this one should be okay. There, now you can see. Should be okay, but you can always take a little bit of twine and just weave it in, and just even take a section of twine and go across here, here, and then down here, and that would keep this plant from blowing off of the trellis. You know, same for these beans. We could do the same thing. Like this isn't very big, so we would go down here and then maybe again here, and then do the same on this side, and that would just hold that plant in place. It's been really dry. One thing that I would do is, believe it or not, I would pre-water. So pre-watering, it's the same thing like if you had a drought and you get 6 inches of rain in a day, all that water is just going to pool up and pond and wash off. So if we pre-wet the soil, it will accept that water better. And I mean, sometimes you get a hurricane and it's terrible and it's just a deluge of rain, and sometimes it's not that bad. So we try to stay on top of it and do the best we can to minimize that damage. Greenhouse is also an issue for us. Believe it or not, I don't do too much to the greenhouse. We've got these hurricane straps on there. We've got two going across, and they're anchored down. But what we would do, I hope our wasp isn't back in this jungle. That lizard sure was, he scared the crap out of me. Is we would come in here, and this is an automatic opener. And what I would do is I would disconnect it, cinch it down so that the wind wouldn't lift it up. And then I would make sure that this is closed so that the wind can't come in. And you guessed it, I would just shut this door, and that would keep the wind out. So, you know, that's the way that we would manage our greenhouse. And I mean, you know, this greenhouse, believe it or not, it's been here for a couple years. It's been through a couple tropical storms and a Category 1 hurricane. So it's done pretty well. More than likely, you're going to get a panel that blows out, but it's supposed to blow out. That saves the structure. If you leave the door open, the panels will blow out, but the structure will stay. That's the idea behind it. So that's what we would do. And then as far as, so we've got all this corn that we're growing. Fortunate thing is there's not really a whole lot you could do for the corn. If you wanted to get crazy, you could probably Florida weave it or something, but I'm not really wanting to get too crazy, and I think it's just one of those things that you would have to be willing to sacrifice. So I'm hoping that we don't have this issue right now, but if we do, it is what it is. We don't have a hurricane coming as of yet. I did a video about this years ago, and we had a Category 5 storm projected to come up here. It made it as a 1, but I had made that video in kind of like a moment's notice, and I wanted to get this out for plenty of time for people to be able to digest it and make a plan for their space, because all of this is really important. I mean, you know, like this pot right here, for instance, it's not going anywhere. That pot's not going to move, but I'm not so worried about that. I mean, you're talking, sometimes these can come in the peak of your garden season, and you don't really want that to kind of take over and destroy your garden, right? And it has happened here before. And that brings me to one part that's really hard to understand unless you've been through it, but I think it's important that you have to accept the fact that if a hurricane comes, you might not have a garden afterwards. There's things you can do to save parts of your garden, which we can talk about, but for the most part, like, that garden might be gone and you may have to just start over. So that's where it's important to know what plants do what grows fast, what grows slow, what times of year is the plant, because a lot of times, like, the peak of hurricane season is just starting, or it's getting ready to come up within the next like 2 weeks, I believe. And so if you think about it, it's actually not the worst time if it comes at like the peak, because let's say it hits in September, like September 1 is usually when we start really having to worry about them. You can start over a fall garden and kick it off just fine. So there is that, but you'd have to protect those plants if anything else came, but they would be so low to the ground, it would be a lot more gentle on them. Thing I forgot too is if you have melons or anything that's really prone to cracking, harvest that too. It's just going to crack and get ruined. So you might as well just go ahead and get it and get what you can out of it and go from there. But otherwise it would just be, you know, you're just going to lose the plant if you get 10, 15 inches of rain. So the shade house here, we would just lay it down and tie it down. Our beehives, we have a method of anchoring them down, and we'll do that if you're watching this and you're curious. We'll do that on Sandy Bottom Bees as the storms approach. You know, the storm season picks up. We'll show you how we do that. I've got to install a couple more systems to hold them down, so we'll do that. And then our chickens, for example, if you come out here to the chickens, next aspect of this, but what we do is we leave them out until the storm gets bad, and then we just lock them in the coop. And then we just kind of hope and pray. That's all you can do. But for right now, they would stay out until it started getting bad, and they may end up putting themselves in the coop anyways. So we can, you know, obviously run that. This leaves the other point is like, have yourself prepared to have certain things on hand to do quick fixes. So some twine, for instance, something like that. Maybe some kind of clip if you have something that you may need to clip. Even zip ties, anything real quick. 'Cause, you know, especially if the storm hits during the day and I'm watching my garden and I see an issue arise, then I can come out and I can fix it real quick, right? So if my tomato blows over, I can come out and I can retie the tomato cage down. If the cattle panel blows over, I can come fix that right quick. And then, you know, kind of start doing stuff like that. If the weather's pretty, I don't come out if it's real bad. If I feel like a tree is gonna fall or something, have it. That's all there is to it. One thing I wouldn't do is I would not cover the garden with tarps or anything like that. You're just kind of asking for trouble. And a lot of times it's really just better just to let the rain hit it, let it wash it, get deep watered, and then just kind of leave it. You know what I mean? It's just, you're just kind of asking for trouble with that, and you just need to accept that, like, I may lose my corn. You know, I've never had problems with my sweet potatoes. They stay just fine, but you may end up losing that. So just keep that in mind as that happens. You don't want to do anything crazy. And remember, when you're looking at a hurricane and it's coming to you, the northeast quadrant of the hurricane, so if the eye is here, it's going to be right here. That's the worst part of the hurricane. So if it's skirting you and you're going to get the south, the southeast, or south, southwest quadrant of the hurricane, it's not going to be as bad. And a lot of times if you're new to an area that has hurricanes and stuff like that, it's not like if you see it's got 120 mile an hour winds, the whole thing's like that. It's just really one small section. You just need to hope and pray that you don't get into that one small section. You know, we've been through Category 3 hurricanes, and the highest gusts we've got are 70, 80 miles an hour, you know, and then a lot of the times it'll be 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. So that kind of works with that. Now, when the hurricane's over, the first thing I do after I pick everything up and whatever is I spray my whole garden down with fresh water. And the reason why is because hurricanes generally dump very salty water. So I'll come out here and I'll spray it all down with a hose, and then you just kind of get to tying. If a stem's not broken, try and save it. If a stem's broken, you could try to repair it or you can pull it. It's just really that simple. And then you just kind of go from there. You know, it could be a blessing. Maybe you didn't have room for a fall garden, now you will. I mean, that's how it goes. Same thing applies to nor'easters. So nor'easters, if you live in New England, it's the exact same thing. They're basically just cooler weather hurricanes. They're not as powerful usually, but they're more prolonged, which can actually be even worse. You know, a hurricane usually lasts a day. A nor'easter can last days. I've been in nor'easters that last 5-6 days before, and it's just constant. So that's another aspect of it. So, you know, it doesn't matter where you are, no matter what, you're gonna have to deal with some kind of weather. You know, if I was living in the Midwest and it was severe weather season, I would definitely plan accordingly to that. You know, hail, there's not much you can do other than block the hail, and you're not really going to block it. Winds and everything like that, like, you have that option. But it's curious when most of the severe weather happens, the plants they're not mature, you know. This plant, like, that's gonna blow over no problem. And I've seen corn just lay right over, and it generally doesn't come back, but that's part of it. We get through the season and we start getting more into hurricane season. You know, I hope everybody's prepared, and I hope you know how to handle it and you feel a little bit more comfortable, but just expect the unexpected and be happy when you don't get that. And I hope everybody's safe out there, and I hope this has really helped you moving forward. And if you've had any kind of issues and any kind of severe weather, anything with your garden or anything you've done to help it out, let us know in the comments, because there's a plethora of ideas. That's just basically what I do.